What's up, guys? Welcome to the Strangeverse. I'm your host, Nick Strange. Today we're going to be talking about what could have happened, the DCEU, Episode 2, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. That's a mouthful. But let's turn the clocks back to 2016. Young Nick Strange had been telling his friends for months about this new Superman-Batman movie that was going to revolutionize the superhero genre. This is how superhero movies are supposed to be, and none of that pussy Marvel shit. How wrong I was. How wrong I was. I don't think I've ever been so deeply gutted and disappointed walking out of a movie after being hyped for so long. I'd wanted a Superman-Batman crossover for 20 years, and that was so not what we needed. I came around to the film later on after watching the Ultimate Edition. It's a lot stronger than the theatrical cut for sure, but Jesus, the impact this film had, we're still feeling it. But it could have been totally different, and maybe if some of these changes I want to get into would have been made, it wouldn't have fucking sucked so bad. By 2016, Warner Brothers had been flirting with the idea of a Superman-Batman crossover for years. Of course, you've got the Schumacher Batman films where Metropolis is referenced in Batman Forever, and the great line from Clooney, "This is why Superman works alone," in Batman and Robin. In that same time period, Superman Lives was being developed by Tim Burton, and the rumor at the time was that Keaton might come back as Batman in that film, or at least as Bruce Wayne. That would have been interesting for sure. Back in 2001, the Batman and Superman franchises had both stalled at WB, and development began on a Batman vs. Superman crossover project. Andrew Kevin Walker, the writer of Seven, had been hired to write a script for the film, and soon after, Wolfgang Peterson, director of Neverending Story and later Troy, he was attached to direct. Soon after these announcements, we started getting casting rumors. Johnny Depp and Colin Farrell were apparently both up for the role of Batman, while Jude Law, Josh Hartnett, and Christian Bale were apparently up for the role of Superman. The idea of Christian Bale as Superman is kind of crazy, but if you think about it, Batman and Superman have been drawn very similarly in the comics, so I can kind of see the vision. I think Josh Hartnett would have been a really great Superman at that time, but as he's gotten older, I think he would make a really strong Batman. I can definitely buy Johnny Depp as Batman being something that the studios wanted at that time, but I think he would have been a much better Joker, to be honest. Development eventually stalled on Wolfgang Peterson's Batman vs. Superman project, and we got Batman Begins and Superman Returns instead. We never got any references to Metropolis or Superman in the Nolan trilogy, but we did get a small reference to Gotham City in Superman Returns. Around that same time, there was a small Easter egg poster for Batman vs. Superman in I Am Legend. That film was written by Akiva Goldsman, who had also worked on a draft of the Wolfgang Peterson Batman vs. Superman project. It was sort of an inside joke saying that the end of the world would happen before a Batman vs. Superman movie actually happens. But then that brings us to Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which featured a satellite in the Superman Zod fight that had the Wayne logo on it. It was the same Wayne logo from the Dark Knight trilogy. Eagle-eyed fans thought it was perhaps confirmation that the Nolanverse existed in the same universe as this new Superman. And apparently, that actually could have happened. Snyder's on record saying it wasn't 100% off the table. It's hard to imagine how different things would have gone if Christian Bale would have returned as Batman. Fans started really thinking about the possibility of the Snyder Man of Steel universe featuring a Batman. Later, we got one of the greatest Comic-Con moments of all time when Zack Snyder brought out Harry Lennix and he read a quote from Dark Knight Returns and showed the Batman vs. Superman logo, and the crowd just went crazy. I can still remember watching that video for the first time and I got goosebumps. But soon after this announcement, we started getting our first Batman casting rumors, and I was going crazy with excitement. Besides Christian Bale, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was obviously discussed heavily by fans, and apparently it was discussed internally as well. Ryan Gosling was up for the role, and if you look at him in something like Drive, he has this calculated intensity that I think could have been really amazing in the role. Joe Manganiello, who was of course up for Superman in Man of Steel, was up for the role of Batman. Apparently he was on the short list, heavily considered for it, and visually I can actually really see this working out, but I'm glad he got Deathstroke instead. Jason Momoa was originally auditioning for the role of Batman, and he walked out of the door with the Aquaman role instead. Max Martini is one of the weirdest names on this list. I don't really see it, but I guess Zack Snyder saw something in the guy, so whatever. Matthew Good, again, one of the finalists for Superman and Man of Steel. He was up for this role. Fans will recognize him from Watchmen as Ozymandias. I think he would fit Batman a little bit better than Superman, but still kind of a weird idea. I could maybe take him as Brainiac. Richard Armitage, who was Thorin Oakenshield in the Hobbit trilogy. Not the worst pick. He's got the gruffness that I look for in a good Batman, and he had the look, but I'm glad it didn't happen ultimately. Matthias Schoenaerts, apparently that was Zack Snyder's number 2 pick, and number 2 is right. He ended up being the villain in Supergirl instead, but him as Batman, I don't see it visually or in any of the roles he's played. He doesn't really give that vibe to me personally. But then the most interesting what if is definitely Josh Brolin as Batman. Like, I can't imagine a better guy to pick for a Frank Miller-esque Batman. He just has the look, the voice, the chops. I kind of always just saw Affleck in Batfleck, and I think that Brolin would have disappeared much more in the role. That's probably the biggest what if of Batman casting for me personally. In addition to a new version of Batman being introduced here, we also found out that Wonder Woman would be making her first live-action appearance since 2011's failed Adrian Palicki Wonder Woman TV pilot. It's terrible, but you should go watch it. There were a number of other actresses that were considered for the role, and it's hard not to imagine all the people that could have played the role better than Gal Gadot. My favorite of this list is probably Olga Kurylenko. She's an amazing actress. She ended up playing Taskmaster in the MCU, but her role in this movie, Centurion, as this warrior, really sold me on her as Wonder Woman. And I remember when this shortlist came out, narrowed down to the actresses that were being seriously considered, Olga was far and away my favorite pick for it. And we've got Elodie Yung. She ended up playing Elektra in the Daredevil series. She was amazing there. She's got the physicality, the chops. It would have been a good pick. And then, of course, Jamie Alexander, Sif from the Thor movies. I think this was an obvious pick, and apparently it actually was being considered internally. I don't know how far along this got, but I mean, it's not really hard to imagine how she would have done, but I still think Olga was probably my favorite pick for it. And then the other huge character that was being cast for this movie was, of course, Lex Luthor, played to perfection by Jesse Eisenberg. I'm just oh my god. He sucked. He sucked so bad. It was pretty much the worst DC villain ever. Oh my god. There were so many people that could have played it better. Um, Everybody on this list that was considered instead of him would have been a million times better. That being said, Jesse Eisenberg is an awesome actor. He would have made a great Jimmy Olsen, which he was actually up for, apparently, before Zack Snyder just decided to say fuck it and cast him as Lex Luthor instead. But we've got Adam Driver, who was up for Lex Luthor. I think he obviously has the voice for it. Not sure visually if I see him as Lex Luthor, but I think he would have been fantastic. He was rumored to be up for the role of Nightwing, but that was ultimately not true at all. He was only up for Lex. And then we've got Joaquin Phoenix, who of course later played Joker. He would have been an amazing Lex. He apparently turned the role down. Bryan Cranston was considered internally. I don't know how far along that discussion went, but he was clearly the fan pick at that time. Everybody wanted him for the role. And then Tom Hanks was mentioned as one of the options for it. Seeing him as the villain in Cloud Atlas, I can actually really picture him as Lex Luthor. He does a great villain. And then Leo was, he apparently had a discussion with Zack Snyder. It's kind of cute, honestly, that Snyder aims that high. He was thinking about Daniel Day-Lewis for General Zod and then Leonardo DiCaprio for Lex Luthor. It's not to say that Zack Snyder can't get great actors in his movies, because he does, but those guys are notoriously picky. I don't think that there was ever a chance that either of them would have accepted those roles. Of that list, any of those would have been a million times better than Jesse Eisenberg. Jenna Malone was heavily rumored to play Carrie Kelly, but that ended up being completely false. I think people just ran with the Dark Knight Returns angle. She ended up playing a character called Jeanette Clyburn instead. Worked closely with Lois Lane in the film. And then a guy named Dan Amboyer. He was a drone pilot in the movie, but fans saw his listing on IMDb and thought, like, obviously a pilot in a DC movie, it has to be Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. And the dude started to see the attention he was getting, and I think he kind of played it up a little bit on social media, like fanning the flames, like maybe I am Green Lantern, but pretty understandable that he would try to capitalize on that, but that ended up not being true at all. After the film released, some concept art dropped featuring early designs for the character Metallo. The designs interestingly featured a version of the character that was missing both of his legs. The character Wallace Keefe, played by Scoot McNairy in Batman vs. Superman, was also missing both of his legs. He had lost them in the Battle of Metropolis.
Ain't that interesting?
Perhaps Metallo was being considered as the main physical villain in early drafts of the script written by David Goyer before Chris Terrio was hired to rewrite the script. So yeah, those were the biggest what-ifs that I was able to dig up, and I think a lot of these changes, if they had been made, would have really benefited DC and the history and legacy of DC on film wouldn't have been so goddamn bleak. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you next time.